What's going on, everybody? Today it's story time with All Out Bikes. If you're not familiar with this channel, my name is Jason. I work at All Out Bikes in beautiful Four Oaks, North Carolina. And basically today we're going to be talking about some e-bikes, or actually a e-bike in particular, and how I was introduced to this company. And what it is basically a customer that lives 45 minutes to an hour away. He actually called up and checked to make sure that we work on e-bikes, which naturally we do. He loved our reviews on our channel, not channel, but our company, and he wanted to actually drive this way to have us work on his e-bike. He actually came by, and it turns out that he what it was a Scott Patron Ebike, which, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, even though things weren't all perfect, that is actually a great bike. So if you're looking for a good high quality e-bike, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, it's actually a really good bike, but there are some issues. So when I was introduced to Scott, this was back in the 90s. And Scott, they were making some really cool bikes, and you know what? We loved them. They were great bikes. They were coming out with some early suspension, which sucked. They came out with some crazy handlebars, which were kind of cool back then. This is the same Scott that does like snow skis. They do goggles and a variety of other things. So Scott is a very big company, and it was actually a bit of a shock in the 90s when they stopped. I believe it was the 90s, but they stopped making bikes. The company didn't go out of business. They just stopped doing bikes because they said that they weren't making any money. At least that's what I was told. So they just decided to concentrate on the products that did make money for them. And then there's some other things, but let's talk about this bike. So the customer, whenever he brought it in, he told us that he just bought it, and when he got on the bike, the very first pedal stroke he took on the bike, the chain snapped. And I told him that probably happened because if you accidentally shift the gears once or twice without pedaling and then get on it and go, since this Padron has a mid drive, whenever you start pedaling, that thing kicks in, and it doesn't care if it's in the middle of shifting or not. It just takes off like a bat out of Hades, and as it's going from one gear to the next, it puts a lot of bind on the chain, and it can naturally break. He's like, no problem. I'd love for you to get this fixed for me, and I want you to check over everything, and just whatever it needs, just go ahead and do it. I trust you. And I don't like when this happens, because basically he was telling me that I could do whatever I needed to do. And lots of times, a mechanic loves to hear that, but the thing is, I prefer that you say, do whatever you need to do. You can go up to X number of dollars, but if it's going to cost more than that, give me a call. That's what I prefer. Okay, because I do not like surprises, and at the end he was a little bit surprised, unfortunately. So let's get into this bike. This was a 1x12 drivetrain, and we have 12-speed chains, but I didn't have the chain that I was really happy with. So what we did was went ahead and we ordered this chain for the customer, so it took a few days to come in. So in the meantime, I really couldn't do much with the bike, so I was waiting for the chain. We got the chain in. We installed the chain, and I took it out for a test ride to check out the bike to see how it was handling, how things were working. And like a dummy, I went ahead and I put it on turbo. That's the go fast mode, without ever being on the bike, but I work on bikes all the time. I'm used to them. I've been on a lot of e-bikes. I've been on some very fast e-bikes, and I've been on some faster e-bikes than this one, but still, it's not something that you should do. So I put it on the turbo, took it out for a test ride, and this thing immediately wheelied up, which is fun. So I just tapped on the brake, and it was no problem, but it was quite lively. And you know, a lot of people think a 250 watt motor is not much, and you know what, for a hub motor, that's not, it's horrible, in fact. But this is a mid-drive, and the beauty of having a 250 watt motor is, one, it's lighter. It doesn't draw as much power as a bigger one whenever you're going full throttle. But with a mid-drive, you're able to actually adjust the torque by just simply changing the gears. So if you want to increase the torque, then you shift it to a lower gear, and that 250 watt motor will take off like a bat out of Hades, like it did for me. So I'm playing around on this thing, and it's working great. The shifting it's shifting. It's not shifting great, but it was shifting, and the rear brake was making a little bit of noise, and whenever I took a look at the brake pad was just starting to make contact with the spring because it was so thin. And you know, but handling wise, it felt real good. The rear shock felt kind of soft, and it had several levers for lockout and such. At this point, I found out that the dropper post wasn't working. And a dropper post, you have a little switch on the handlebar, a little lever, or some of the cheaper ones, there's a lever underneath the seat, but this one was on the handlebar. Whenever you push it, the lever, you can actually push down on the seat, and it drops down quickly without even stopping or breaking out any tools to undo a clamp. And then if you want to make it go up, you simply stand up and you push a button. This was not working at all. And also, when we were testing this out, 11 of the gears were fine, but apparently this guy was using one gear a lot. And under pressure, this new chain, it was skipping over this one gear. So we needed a new cassette. Well, that's a problem, because the cassette that we had was not an e-bike rated cassette, so we needed to order a SLX cassette, which is e-bike rated. Well, we ordered that, and not realizing that it was going to be coming all the way from the West Coast, so it was going to take another few days to come in, which I feel for this customer, because he has a brand new bike and he wants to take it for a ride. And I'm hoping he's absolutely loving this bike right now, because it is a very, very nice bike. So we ordered the cassette, and I started working on the bike. The first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to fix the dropper post. And on this Padron, you have to understand how it was working. It's got an internal cable routed frame. So all the cables went into the stem area, and it goes through the frame, and then whenever it gets to the motor, it actually goes underneath the motor, and then it curls around the motor and goes up through the frame, and then there's like a 15-degree bend that the cable goes over and then goes up into the seat post. So whenever I was trying to take care of the seat post, typically what you do is you push in on the cable near the head tube and you pull up on the seat post. This was not happening. It would not move, and no matter how hard I pushed and how hard I pulled, which you can't pull too hard because you don't want to damage the post, I ended up looking it over, and I figured that I have to pull the motor out of this bike. This is turning a simple cable adjustment into an utter nightmare. So I start to pull the, there's a plastic shroud on the, covering the motor to make it look good. Purely cosmetic. It doesn't serve any other purpose. So I pull it off and immediately notice that there is a bolt. The main bolt keeping the motor in place wasn't even screwed in. It was actually out by a half an inch. In fact, it would have fallen out completely except that plastic shroud. That bolt was rubbing against that shroud to where this black bolt was silver on the end. I don't know how long this thing had been ridden like that. So I removed the bolt, and there's two other bolts that are on the back side of the bottom bracket area. And whenever I went to go remove those bolts, they were loose. I don't know how in the world I was riding this bike with this motor barely in this frame without noticing it, but it didn't have any play, and it seemed like it was fine. But I removed the motor and found that the cables were zip tied there, and so you actually had to undo the motor, you had to undo the zip ties, and then you could actually remove the actual housing. So that's all fine, but I left the cable in there, removed the housing, and whenever I left the cable in there, I was hoping that the housing would the cable would help guide it through the frame. And it was a struggle. I monkeyed around with this thing for over an hour before it finally it finally went where it went, where it was supposed to. Because whenever the cable, with all the angles and everything, the cable housing was wanting to go one way while the cable was trying to pull it through. Anyway, turned into a huge job. I got the housing put in, I put the motor back in, I was getting everything adjusted, and it's like, okay, great, I need to move the seat post. And it's like, oh my gosh. There was, I didn't mention there's actually a plastic sleeve for this dropper post for the cable to actually move. But due to the design, and this is a mountain bike, he got mud and dirt all in there, and this sleeve got mud and dirt in there, which is the reason why, or one of the reasons why it wouldn't slide through. Also, the zip ties on the inside were preventing that from happening. But I didn't zip tie it. I did blow out the sleeve, but the cable housing still wouldn't slide through there. So I had to remove the motor a second time to get the seat post in the right position. We got the seat post in the right position, put the motor back in, tightened everything up like it's supposed to with blue Loctite to make sure that nothing comes undone. And the cassette came in by this point, so we went to go put the new cassette on, and I went to go take the bike out for a test ride. And whenever I took it out for a test ride, it wouldn't shift. It would not. It did shift one time, and then after that one time it shifted, it wouldn't shift again. And I was thinking, wow, I must have screwed up. The customer had actually called already at this point, right before I took it out for a test ride, and I told him that he lived an hour. Well, actually, he lived an hour away. He told us it took an hour to get here, and I was finishing up with the bike, so I naturally told him, come on by, and so whenever I test rode it and it wasn't working, I thought I messed up, and I decided to try to fix this for him without charging him any extra money, because if I made a mistake, then I want to take care of my mistakes. So I removed the motor again. By the way, if you need to replace the cable housing at all for the derailleur, if you have to replace the cable housing for the seat post, if you need to mess with any of the wiring on this bike, you have to remove the motor on this Padron. And as good as this bike is, they really could have made a better design, because this bike, I was tearing my hair out working on this bike. This is something I've been doing for many years, so it's not something that I'm new to. It's just I'm new to this model. Anytime one of these bikes comes in, I'm definitely going to be more prepared, because of the I could have done things a little bit quicker. I have more knowledge, but the thing is, these Padrons, if you have to replace the cable housing, it is an ordeal. So the customer came in, and he came in with his bike completely apart, and he's thinking that, wow, he said that he was done. And I explained to him that I had made a mistake. Must have damaged the housing, which I'm trying to find the housing right now, but whenever I pulled out the housing for his bike, there was absolutely no damage to the housing. Okay, so here's the cable housing, which it's continuous all through the frame, and upon inspection, there is absolutely no damage whatsoever to the housing. So it must have been something with the cable and the housing. It might have been, I might have contributed to something to it, but it could have also just went bad. So there's the housing there. Now the seat post, the dropper seat post, what happened is when the customer, the previous person that had this bike, he had the seat post a little higher, and I believe since this new customer, the guy that just bought it, was a little bit shorter than him, most likely, I'm assuming that, because I believe that it looked like the seat post was higher. This guy just lowered the seat post, and whenever he did, he pushed down on it, and it caused the housing to explode here. To lower the seat post, you have to remove the motor, so that you can actually pull on the cable as you're pushing down the seat post, which is a stupid design. There's got to be something a little bit easier. But that's basically what happened in the past couple of days, and I'm sorry to keep on going about this, but it is a really cool bike. If you have one, you're a lucky person, because it's a great riding bike. Just remember, if you need to adjust the seat post or replace the housing, don't forget to remove the motor on this thing, because just about everything you have to do on this thing that's anywhere near the motor, you have to remove the motor. But anyway, hopefully you found this a little bit entertaining, informative perhaps, and if you did like this, please leave me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to tell your friends. Check out some of the other videos on the corner of the screen. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you later. Thanks.